I was leaving the office on November 26th, that's Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving, and I saw a huddle of people over there at the communications office, and I just would have said, "Happy Thanksgiving. I'm going home to my family." And somebody said something like, "We'll call you." And I got home later that evening. They called me and they informed me that BMW had been invited to testify before the congressional subcommittee. The request was based around the Takata airbag situation, where a lot of different automobile manufacturers were using the Takata supplier to supply them with the airbags. And when our CEO, Norbert Reithofer, got the invitation of the subpoena, he looks at it and says, "Takata, United States Congress, I think Craig can handle that," right? This was beginning of a transformation of the next few days, because the hearing was actually on the following Wednesday, December 3rd. So I actually had really about not even 7 days to prepare. My entire kitchen became kind of mission control for the Takata hearing preparation. I had to move my whole family out. I had to ignore the turkey. The intensity and the amount of information and the amount of preparation and from the whole company. I had lots of people from our legal department, from our communications department, to be able to speak hopefully intelligently and answer questions, but also represent who are we and where are we in this issue, right? And we have nothing to hide. That was the message. And we're doing everything to try to make it right by the customer, period. And I remember landing in Washington, D.C., and took a cab over to our law firm. And I walked into this kind of a conference room, very big, lots of cameras. This person said, "Hey, can I help you?" And I said, "Is this for the testimony for the hearing in 2 days?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Well, I'm your witness," right? And he goes, "You're Mr. Westbrook?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Craig Westbrook, I'm your witness." And he says, "That guy needs a haircut." And so my first exposure to our entire legal team was an appointment we made later that evening that I actually get cleaned up a little bit. What we did was we did a lot of role play, a lot of intensive sort of cross-examination, you can imagine. So I had someone asking me questions in sort of a mock environment. You would do something and they would say something and they would say, "Stop, how you doing, Mr. Westbrook? Fine, would you like some water?" And then someone would say, "Wow, that was really bad. Let's watch it." And so the idea that you actually got to review your poor performance in front of everybody, and then have these sort of moments, these learning and teaching moments that would say, "Don't say this, try to say this." Everything about your presence was sort of directed and called into question, but was difficult sometimes to handle the intensity and the pressure of the actual questioning, right? And then the review, where on top of it they would sort of pour the criticism until it felt like there was nothing more to criticize, right? So we did plenty of that, and right when I thought I couldn't take anymore, we would disappear and race up on a Capitol Hill and go meet with members of the congressional subcommittee. And I remember at some point on Tuesday evening, one of our corporate attorneys said, "I think you're ready." Sometimes you need somebody outside yourself to say, "You've had enough. You're done. You're good. We've prepped you on the Hill. We brought you back here. We humiliated you on film. We told you about it. We took you back to the Hill, lather, rinse, repeat. We've done all this." And the next day was the hearing. We started, I believe, right at 9 o'clock. We walked in at 8:59 intentionally. The media is there. And I won't forget, in front of that table, right, there's all the cameramen are lined up down there, and they're all waiting for you to do something probably embarrassing, right, and filming you pretty much full time and clicking and so on. So that was sort of a nonstop droning throughout the period of the hearing. You're not sitting in a room, you're sitting in a kind of like an amphitheater setting. I mean, you're at the bottom and you have to look up. And the people, I think the chair of the committee sits at the very top row. I think that's intentional, but I will tell you, it is either way, it's intimidating. The amount of I would say, anxiety going into it, and also the feeling that you have to deliver. There was this sort of turning point also in the hearing, just like in the preparation the night before, where you say, "You know what, I've said the message I wanted to get out, and I did it under the auspices of this hearing and those questions being asked." When the hearing finally was over, we went out this, I don't know, it felt like, all of a sudden it was like Batman, right? So we suddenly were like going out this side door, and then across the hallway, and then into a little other door, and then we ran down something, and then we ran outside. Some car came over, it was a BMW, and the door flung open, and we got in. And I was like, either we're going back to the office really fast, or we're all getting kidnapped. I couldn't tell, but as it turned out, it was one of our drivers, and we went back to the office and kind of regrouped. And they said to me, "Be sure to lay low. You've done well, but you're tired and you don't want to encounter the media right now. It's just not necessary, right? So took me over to the train station in Washington, and I was told, lay low. So I went to the back of a restaurant, and every person that I saw, I felt like, okay, they're going to want to come talk to me, right? So it's also my ego moment. I think most people simply didn't know, much less cared at the time. As such, I got on the train, went back to Penn Station, a couple hours, and reviewing the last 6.5 days in my mind, kind of start to finish, but also going back here and forward there. And did I say it right? And did I get it wrong? And when I got off the train, was really now in a sort of a bit of a trance, very exhausted, tired, emotionally drained. I looked around and I said, okay, there's some cars over there. So I went over and I didn't see my name in any of the cars, and I thought that was strange. And then I looked around, and so then I went over here and I looked at, and I couldn't find. And then things started becoming, shaky for me. I had like two things to do: get in a car and go home. Okay. And at this point, I couldn't process. In my head, I had, millions of people can watch me on C-SPAN, but no one of them can pick me up. And the funny thing is, there's other ways to get home, but this was planned, and this was part of the plan. I needed the plan to work. How funny that this can unravel the fiber of their very being at a point when they're probably maybe the more vulnerable they've been in a long time. And I was just becoming unraveled by the simple fact that no one could pick me up. I remember saying this, and this is actually really not a joke, but I remember saying, this could be worse. It could start raining. And at that very moment, it didn't start sprinkling. The heavens opened up, and within a minute, I looked like a drowned sewer rat. And there I went. I stood there. I didn't go rushing for cover. I just stood there. This is perfect, right? So what a way to end the 7-day odyssey. And I have to say, I was in this own little sort of egotistical self-pity cocoon, whatever we call that. And at that moment, somebody came up behind me and said, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing great. Thanks for asking." Right? And I turned around, and it was a tall man, and he said, "Can I take you somewhere?" And I said, "Well, how ironic. Of course you can take me somewhere. You can take me home." And he said, "I don't know where that is, but I'm sure we can find it." And I said, "All right." And I grabbed my bag and I just started following a complete stranger. And we come around a corner, and there's his chariot, his rescue machine waiting for me. It was probably a 25, 30-year-old Crown Victoria. Not one body panel matched the other one. Okay, he claimed it was a taxi. I just didn't care. And he said, "Would you like to get in? And I'll take you home." He opened the door for me, and I remember sliding into this vinyl seat and thinking about testifying for BMW as a car company, on Capitol Hill a few hours ago, and now enjoying a ride in a rickety Crown Victoria. Was about as sort of, diametrically opposed as I could have imagined. And the irony of that moment did strike me, even in my despair. And he as he shut the door, I remember thinking of that cartoon, right, where you shut the door in the old car and every body panel just falls off at that moment, right? Didn't happen. And he said, "Where are you going?" And I told him my address, and he says, "It's a long way away." And I said, "Yeah, well." And I was irritated and somehow savoring the irony of this moment in bitter terms. And he turns around and he says, "Do you like music?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I do like music." "Well, I like reggae." And I said, "Well, why do you like reggae?" And he turns on some music, and it was some reggae music. And he proceeded to ask me, who I was, and I told him, and he says, "Where was I coming from?" And I said, "Well, funny you ask, I'm coming from Washington, D.C. He said, "What were you doing there?" And it was one of these sort of short question, short answer, right? So, I was testifying in Congress. And his engagement, I think the music, I think the wasn't necessarily his need to talk or interact, but I think he kind of felt the right moment to engage me, and then finally, he went into sort of more subjective, more questions. How was I doing? What was going on? And I told him the whole story that I've just been telling. I said, I'm worn out, and my car didn't show up, and then here you were, right? And he tells me he's from Haiti. Slowly, as I was probably drying off physically, he made me feel better. He made me feel comfortable in an old rickety car by virtue of his conversation, his tone of voice, the kinds of things he was asking, but also the music. It was very important that he put value on that and the volume and what was he playing and so on. He actually helped me kind of open up and became more who I know who I really am, right? Not like I'm not that guy who's all angry that my car didn't show up. But that was just the end for me. It was just, I was done. I couldn't process it. When we pulled into the driveway, my wife saw the lights and she came out with an umbrella. It was still raining, and I asked him what the fare was, and I gave him twice the amount, and he drove away. He backed up and he drove away, and then I waved and he waved, and I could hear Bob Marley as he was driving away. And my wife said, "Who was that?" Like I knew him, right? And I said, I have no idea, but it was probably the platform to return to some sense of normalcy for me. Ever since then, I've thought, how simple was that? How simple was the delivery? How uncomplicated was he with me in a day full of so many complications, in a week, in so much effort, so much stress, and then to be sort of forgotten, to be picked up with with the rains, and it was a perfect storm, and then to simply be lifted back up and say, you know what, you're fine. That was a gift. And I think this is the kind of experience that I would like to project in my own company by focusing on the simplicity of the customer's experience starting with human interaction. How do we treat each other? Are we checking up on each other? How are you? Are you doing okay? The idea of simply saying hello, of asking someone, can I help you? Whether they're soaking wet at a train station and needing a ride home, or whether they walk into your showroom and they're not dressed very well, but they simply have an interest in the product. It sounds easy, but once you leave your house, or maybe once you leave your taxi cab, it can be not necessarily difficult, but not natural. So the task is to make it natural, to make it as prevalent and present and meaningful as we elevate our product and our brand to be.